Can you just push the button right above your head?
She's got the controller.
Or Nicole will solve all problems.
Did you see where, we're 9 o'clock, but did you see where Hallmark movies, when they're filming this year, are putting plexiglass between the actor and the actress in a kissing scene? They're putting plexiglass between them.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're going to roll right into the CRA. So I will call us to order and ask if there are any amendments to the October 12th, 2020 meeting.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous? Are there any citizens to be heard for the CRA? Seeing none, item 4.1.
Good morning, Amanda Thompson, Director of the CRA. We're looking to approve the proposed 2021 Community Redevelopment Agency Board meeting schedule and adopt Resolution 20-03. So we have the proposed dates for our 2021 meetings in front of you. They still coincide with the City Council work sessions. And just as a reminder, we can change, cancel, reschedule as needed.
Any questions for Ms. Thompson? Everyone good with the schedule right now?
Yep.
All right.
Move approval of agenda item 4.1.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous?
Oh, there's a
There's a
comment.
resolution.
Are we reading comments at these, for that last one? I just noticed it. There's a comment for the last agenda item
For the minutes or
for
4.1?
the scheduled meetings.
Well, yeah, one.
Oh, do you want me to read it? Sure. Okay, so this is from Kathy Flaherty. I think these meetings should be held in the evenings when people who work can attend. You could ask in the community what time would be convenient for them in the survey requested by the mayor regarding the CRA mission. Also, I think there should be at least one community meeting whereby everyone in the CRA district is invited. If not a community meeting, then there should be a newsletter that goes out to all residents and owners in the district telling them how the trustees are spending their blight mediation funds.
Okay. Well, we've already passed the agenda item. Is there interest in moving them to the evenings?
I think she makes a decent point that we should have some meetings at times that are better for people who work. I think it's worth consideration. I don't know. I mean, one of the things that I advocate for, and it's further on the agenda for the city council meeting, is continuing with call-ins and things like that. So I think we just need to be real cognizant of times when residents can participate, and 9 a.m. on a work day isn't real conducive to people who have a job other than working in city government. So, I mean, I'm not ready to make a decision, or, I mean, maybe Amanda could do some outreach and find recommendations from people that are involved or something, but I don't.
Have you gotten a lot of feedback of people that would like to come at night should we have the CRA meetings?
What I found in my experience in local government to date is people generally want to get involved when there's an issue that's directly impacting them. And so if we're really interested in how do we get people understanding more and engaged more, I think we do a good job that you can go back and see the recordings of the meeting. I think signing up for the email list at Downtown Clearwater, which goes out monthly, we certainly could add on a paper newsletter once or twice a year if we wanted to send something directly. And then I'd say if there were certain topics that you really wanted input on, we should organize meetings around that. That would be my recommendation versus changing the actual meeting time, because just like going to the gym, right, it's like there all the time, so you ignore it. If you know I can go every month, then you tend not to, versus here's the special thing, here's an issue that impacts you, let's make sure we reach that broadly.
Or we could have like one evening meeting per quarter or per half a year or something, twice a year.
Absolutely, and I've talked with Assistant City Manager Delk over the next couple months about setting up Saturday morning tours, just like we did for the current Citizens Academy class, so people know what's going on with Imagine Clearwater, what's happening with downtown, they can see it for themselves. So I think initiatives like that are really effective.
I don't, first of all, any citizen can come to the city council meeting and talk at Citizens to be heard, whether it's about the CRA, the DDB, or, you know, whatever they want to talk about. The only thing I would be a little bit apprehensive is if we made a longer CRA meeting, and some of them can last an hour, hour and a half, and pushed our regular council meeting until starting at 7:30. And then citizens that are coming to speak on issues that are at the council meeting now are, you know, sitting around until 8:30, 9 o'clock to get into some of the agenda items. I would prefer to maybe have a separate CRA item for a couple meetings that does not have a long agenda. See if there is any appetite for even coming specifically. And then if there isn't, go back to our normal schedule. That would be, to me, the most logical way to do it. But I really would not want to have, you know, unless it was literally a separate night. And then we also have to worry about staff and other issues. So we'll take it under advisement. We have a resolution.
Yes. Now, do you want to go ahead and adopt this resolution?
Yes.
Resolution number 20-03, a resolution of the Community Redevelopment Agency of the City of Clearwater, Florida, adopting the CRA 2021 meeting schedule.
Do I have a motion?
I move we adopt resolution number 20-03.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. 4.2.
There's a public, do you see that, Rosemary? There's a public comment on this one, too.
I'll try to get it
Okay.
first.
Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Michael Fuino. I'm Assistant City Attorney here in Clearwater and the CRA Attorney as well. This discussion item is in response to two issues that the board raised at the September meeting. And the issues were whether or not the city or the CRA can regulate land ownership that any one entity can own. And the second was, what, if any, regulatory actions can the city or the CRA take to combat vacant properties in the downtown area specifically? On the first issue, the law is very clear that neither the city nor the CRA can regulate land ownership, and there's several reasons for that. Most importantly is this idea of this really would be a takings claim. Now, I know we normally think about takings as physical intrusions onto the property to physically take, like shorelines and things of that nature. But government regulatory actions can also constitute takings when they deprive an owner of an economic benefit in the property, or what the law calls investment-backed expectations, which essentially is if I buy a property, I expect to be able to sell it to whoever who wants to pay the most amount of money. If the city or the CRA does something like that, any government regulatory, they have to, under the Florida Constitution, pay full compensation for that, which basically means we'll be liable for whatever the amount of money would be. Another issue, it's similar to a takings, but a little different. It's called the Burt-Harris Act. It's a statutory act that places government regulations that inordinately burden property owners' use or right to the land. The government would be liable for damages for that. So it's kind of the same thing. If someone came in and they said, well, I have a contract from this person for $100 million. And we're saying, well, no, that person can't come in and own property in this area. The city could be liable for that amount of money. And then the other idea is that the city cannot use its zoning powers to regulate land ownership. And the idea of zoning is that you regulate use of land. So, for instance, you can put a zoo in institutional, but you can't put it in low, medium density residential. However, we can't say, well, Sally can own property in commercial district, but she can't own it on US 19. Or Sally can only own one piece of property on US 19. That would be an inappropriate use of the zoning regulations. So the law is very clear on that issue, that we really can't regulate the ownership of the property. Now, the second issue of regulating vacant properties. The city does have some measures at its disposal. First, I would say that the city already does regulate vacant properties, and it's through this idea of the fact that we have already cited or declared that a vacant property is a nuisance. And if it's a nuisance under the Land Development Code, you can cite people for it, you can bring them up before the code board, you can fine them, you can bring them to court, you can do things of this nature. The problem is that, the issue is that the code says that a vacant or abandoned property is one that's been vacant, as well as has another code violation on it, or is unmaintained. And that makes sense, because generally, the problem with vacant properties is not just that they're vacant, but that they're not maintained. People aren't paying taxes, they let the windows burst, let the roof go down, and then those become, really do become nuisances. They become attraction for crimes and things of this nature. So we have a unique issue is where it's vacant but maintained. So what can you do then? Now, what a lot of municipalities across the country and even in this state have done is they've created vacant property registrations. And they essentially require property owners who've had properties that, commercial property owners that have had vacant properties over a certain amount of time, it's usually around 90 days, to register with the city. Say, here's who I am, here's my property, and then they pay a registration fee, which is not a fine, but it's the amount that would cost to cover the government service. The registration can also answer some of the questions I think I've heard council and the trustees say, which is, why is the property vacant? What do you intend to do with it? There's nothing wrong with asking those questions in the form of a registration, but I think what the problem would become is if you just want to fine someone simply because they have a vacant property. I have not been able to find any authority that says you can do that. And I would not want to be on the losing end of that argument in court. And the reason for that is this, is that administrative fines that we impose, whether they're through the court system or through the Code Enforcement Board, are reviewed for a court calls clear and convincing evidence. And that essentially is a heightened standard of that proof. And I have to show that there's a real reason why we're doing this. And the reason for that is because administrative fines are penal in nature, and they affect property rights. And the courts are going to look at them skeptically to begin with. And unless we have a real reason why we're fining people merely because they have a vacant property without any sort of, without any other, there's no broken windows, there's no busted roof, there's nothing like that, that's going to be a tough argument to make. Which is why I say it's much better to try to do the registration. Because I hear the questions from council is, why are you, what is going on with the properties? Well, we can ask those questions in the form of registration, but finding them when we take it into the penal nature, we're really going to run into some problems. And so what I would suggest would be to start to do that. The city already has a registration that we use. We use it for foreclosure, for foreclosed property. So if a property is in foreclosure, we ask that the mortgagee register. We would basically be expanding that registry to find out for vacant properties, and we would tailor it to the circumstances of the case. But you would be able to ask the questions that you want to know, and I think that that sort of ordinance would withstand the scrutiny as opposed to starting to fine people. So to sum up, the city really cannot regulate the amount of ownership any one entity owns, but it does have tools at its disposal to regulate vacancies at the downtown. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions for Mr. Fino? Councilmember Beckman?
I have a question. Oh, you want to do that first?
Yeah, let's hear that first.
Okay, so I have a comment from Kathy Flaherty. I have no issue with the city attorney's opinion. I do, however, think it would be wise to ask the Florida Attorney General for a second opinion. The Attorney General's office gives 3 non-binding opinions to city attorneys upon request. At the same time, you could ask the Florida Attorney General to review the CRA's current policies and agreements to make sure the CRA funds are not being misspent. I know there has been confusion with the DDB CRA contract. At the last meeting, Mr. Albritton was still under the impression that the funds were given to the DDB were a pass-through, not a payment. Ms. Aiken tried to correct his statement, but I am not sure he understood. The issue still needs clarification. Also, Ms. Aiken makes a point to include that the properties are code compliant. The CRA does not do any code enforcement, even though it has the authority to have an enhanced code enforcement program throughout the area. There are numerous properties in dilapidated condition, broken down cars parked on grass, and unkept yards and lots. This includes both businesses and residences. Currently, the city conducts code enforcement, and the CRA trustees wait for investors to rehab derelict properties. The City Code Board is having its first meeting since February. I would assume lots of backlog. If the CRA's only remedy against vacant properties is to have them be code compliant, I think it's imperative that the CRA trustees start a code enforcement program in the CRA, just as is done with enhanced policing. This would allow the already overburdened code department more resources to improve clear water and to monitor that the vacant buildings in the downtown are indeed code compliant.
Councilmember Beckman.
Okay, thank you. All right. When you say that we can ask people who have, or property owners who have vacant buildings to register them, I think that sounds like a good idea. And then we ask them, why is it vacant and what do you intend to do with that? I would think they're not required to answer that. Can't they say it's none of your business, I haven't decided yet?
Yeah, I think that they would, or they wouldn't even have to answer truthfully.
Yeah,
But I don't think that there's anything wrong with asking the question.
I agree. I agree. And then, when we talk about, well, and I have some notes on the document that you gave us, but here's some questions as you were speaking. So when we talk about, you're not advising us to go with administrative fines because we have to have a heightened standard of proof, and that we have to show that there's a real reason for doing this. Can it be simply that we want to see our downtown revitalized and that we can show a decline in economic activity down there? Or is that too, subjective?
I think that's a reason, but then the problem is it comes in that specific case.
That
So if
specific
I'm the-
area?
I'm the property owner's lawyer, I just look around and I say, well, we're in the middle of a pandemic,
Yeah,
and so I can't get a tenant in there.
yeah.
Whether that's true or not, that's a plausible reason. And there's gonna be any of myriad of reasons that they would be able to argue. And so my point just is that for me to jump through that hoop as the city's attorney, is gonna be very difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's very, very hard.
And could you make that argument for different parts of the city? Because what might apply to vacant buildings and well, I guess, and why we'd be assessing fines downtown might not apply on Drew Street or Druid or Countryside or something.
Well, then you could run into potentially equal protection problems because we're not treating everybody in the same situation similarly.
But this vacant building in Countryside doesn't affect that economic, corridor or shopping center or whatever, strip mall area, the way the vacant buildings,
Where would you draw the line
I don't-
geographically? You probably would have judged would ask me,
yeah,
and I would just, just some imaginary invisible line.
yeah.
That we know what it is, but I'm not sure if I could ever really articulate that in terms of clear and convincing evidence.
Okay. And then you said that so we do have some sort of a registration program where if a property is in foreclosure, you said we ask that they register it. Is ask the same as require?
No, they were required.
They're required.
I just mean that's what we asked them to do.
Okay.
And then if they don't do that, then it becomes a code violation, you could technically fine them for that.
Okay. Okay. And then as the attached document, one thing I found interesting is we have Florida statute regulatory fees are subject to use restrictions which requires the fee proceeds to be applied to the cost of the activity and cannot exceed the cost of the activity. Does that apply to the vacant building registration fee? And would,
And that's, would be the registration fee. Now, we do that a lot for like building permits, I guess, are a good example of where you essentially estimate what the cost of the government service is, and then you make the fee from there. The idea is that it's different than, say, like a franchise fee, where we can actually earn, the city can actually earn a profit from the fee. I mean, we're really not supposed to be able to profit from these sort of regulatory fees.
And these fees can't be punitive, so I'm thinking if you're having them register a vacant property within 90 days of it not being, filled, then is that an annual registration fee? And can we accelerate that fee to, what are we gonna use to incentivize people to
Yes, to
develop?
all questions. It would be annually, and I believe you can increase the cost, because there would be increased cost to enforcement and inspection of vacant properties as the times go on.
I don't understand how it would be an increased
Well,
cost.
let's say you have a property that's been vacant for 90 days, and we know about it, but then on the 91st day, it becomes habitable. We don't have to worry about that property anymore, as opposed to if we have a property that's been vacant for 3 years. Now we have to have inspections a lot. Now we have to contact the owner to see what he's doing. Now we're trying to get him in, we're trying to get people in. So the cost of regulating whether it's the registry or the fact that we want that property not to be vacant increased over time.
Okay. But really not punitively. I mean, it's not, right, it's gonna be like, I don't know, a couple $100 or
It's
something.
not punitive in nature, it's just we're spending more government time and resources on one property because of the length of time as we would on another.
Okay. And then I like the idea of, so you've got this, I think we're talking, the New Bedford Code of Ordinances. This city has imposed a sliding scale registration fee that begins at $500 for properties that are vacant for less than 1 year and rises to $3,000 for properties that have been vacant for 3 years or more. So they've got some transparent, easily accessible, and with the dates of how long those things have been vacant. And I think, the public needs to be aware, and maybe they can start putting pressure or whatever. Yeah, and one last thing about the vacant property registry. When you make that list of the vacant property with the address, you'll include what it's zoned for, right? So this is potential residential, this is potential industrial, this is potential, right?
For the foreclosure registry that we have now, I don't.
Or no,
we have a third party that operates that, and I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think they do.
Gina's
We can do
shaking
that.
her head. Can you come up, Gina?
But like for the foreclosure registry as well as the vacant building registry, I think,
Good morning, Gina Clayton, Planning and Development. No, we do not keep that kind of information. We just have whether, the address, the owner, that kind of information. It's not like a list put together for economic development purposes.
but would it be difficult to put what the zoning is for? So when we talk to people and we say, wow, we have 47 properties that are zoned for residential or zoned for commercial that are underutilized or not utilized, it'd be great to have that number to know what, you know what I mean, to,
Sure, I do. I think we'd have to look at who's going to maintain the list, how it's going to be structured and that sort of thing. I mean, getting the zoning is not, a major issue. It's just who's going to maintain it, who's going to do the work on it.
but when we enter in a list, a property with the address, isn't it on the tax bill what it's zoned for? It's not that simple to,
No, it's on the zoning map. We have to do that. Yeah, I mean, it's not difficult. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
say it's difficult to do. It's just that if we're going to maintain it, then we know, we could enter it. And if an outside party is going to, we need to make sure that whatever contract has, we set forth what we want them to maintain.
I think it's valuable to have that information at our fingertips. When we look at promoting our city, growing our city, having more housing and, I think it's really good to have I would like that snapshot of what it is.
I think we have to, I know there's other questions. I think we have to discuss what we're trying to accomplish. And our goal when we asked about this item was, I think we wanted to reduce the number of vacant properties in the downtown. And, looking at your brief, Michael, I don't know that I see a clear path. And I understand where you're coming from about an overview of the downtown. At the same time, I am not real crazy about just increasing our bureaucracy, that we're keeping track of things. If there is not a fairly evident way that we can change the trajectory of these properties, to add another layer of bureaucracy, I'm not quite certain I'm sold on that yet. We get that complaint already in the city from a lot of people, that we have a lot of different layers and that our code is more difficult than some other places. And what we're doing is adding another layer. Now, if we had a real way of incentivizing, or, I mean, it's carrot and the stick. If we either had a way to regulate people into getting their buildings occupied, then I would be interested. And, you know, I still believe that incentives and basic economics ultimately are going to be what wins out. A lot of the properties, take COVID aside, I have no understanding why you would have a building vacant, continue to pay taxes, have to maintain the property. That is irrational behavior to me, at least in the world I live in. That's a good way to, create a small fortune from a large fortune. And so, Vice Mayor, you had a question?
Well, I have more of a comment.
Okay.
I mean, I like what Councilman Beckman says. I've always thought, being on the DDB and working with the CRA, that we ought to have track of, I mean, the whole idea of this downtown area is to promote it, make it vibrant. And we should know when people are selling and buying properties. I mean, specifically buying. I just think that that's a function of either the CRA or, we should know. And asking the question, I think that's a good thing. Asking the question of property owners, what are you going to do with this property? You're coming into this area, and whether they answer or not, I guess you can't force them to answer, but I think we should be asking the question. So I kind of disagree a little bit with what you're saying. I mean, I understand what you're saying, that
Then shouldn't we do it citywide?
well, we're talking about a CRA district. I mean, you create a CRA because it's a depressed district, and just to have things that go against, like you were saying, people buying properties not do anything with it, doesn't make any sense. I mean, they can make the argument, hey, we're buying when this thing turns, we're on the ground floor, but I mean, we don't have a CRA in the whole Clearwater. We have it in specific areas, and I think when you have a CRA, that we ought to know what's going on in the CRA. I mean, I'm not saying I want to add another whole layer of things. I mean, a simple list, really, that we can look at and say, oh, I agree. We got so many buildings in the commercial, residential, we can, I mean, if opportunities come along, we could be selling those opportunities. Whereas now, I don't know. I mean, I know we have a lot of properties being bought up and just being sat on. So I don't know. I'm just saying I like the idea of us asking the question. I'm not sure if that's really going to result in anything, but I think that should be one of the things that we do instead of just saying, hey, we'll just see how it works out economically.
Ms. Thompson, have you thought about the fact of doing a registry, and have you thought about the resources? Is it an additional employee that would then be paid for by the registration fee, or?
Yeah, the registration fee would pay for the work. I assumed it would be in-house. I didn't realize that the city already contracted out for the foreclosure. So of course in my mind, I'm already like, okay, how many hours, will this take? This is a really tough issue. And I think that it's hard. We want a lot of information, right? I want to know what those property owners are doing too. I want to know how they're managing to keep them vacant. And we're walking that line between how much time do we want to spend collecting information so we know things, and how much time do we spend on action, right, to stimulate the market. And I would say the balance of what the CRA staff is doing now is more on that stimulating action side, right? Instead of having Howard Smith go through every 3 months, go through the tax rolls, update the list of vacant properties, find that contact information, right? We focused on getting more events going, marketing the CRA properties. We're doing the work for the opportunity zone, in which we are going to bring the property owners together, those who choose to participate, to ask that very question and try to use that carrot of, we're going to do a big marketing campaign, you have these tax incentives, take advantage now. So it is a tough balance. I think I do agree that in the CRA we should have more information than the city generally on each property, because it is our job to help market those properties. So in my opinion, I think this registration is going to be a little punitive, because what are we doing with that information, right? And if we were in a situation where property owners were saying, we don't have the resources or the know-how to market our properties, that might be a little different. We could say, well, let us use these fees, let us get a registration, and let us market your properties for you. I don't believe that's our case, because I think when they do want to get tenants, it happens, right? They come to reasonable terms of lease agreements, they use professional brokers, right? All this kind of information. So I'm not sure that, I think this would just be looked at as, you're just forcing us to go through, you know, a listing and pay a fine, and we're not quite sure how that small amount of revenue that you're going to generate to cover the staff cost is really going to be used to help us as a property owner.
Okay, I'm going to let them get a first bite. Councilmember Hamilton and
Well,
then
I think
Bunker.
it's easy enough to read the zoning maps, because, I mean, residential is an allowable use in commercial, but not vice versa. You can't build commercial in a residential zoning, but, so any property is eligible for more residential. It's just a matter of if that's what the property owner wants to do with it. So I don't know that we need to, have a, you know, when you pull up a property, say, you know, here it is, well, it's zoned commercial. Well, you can research, it's not too hard to research to say, here's what we allow in our commercial zonings. But I like what you brought forward. I really appreciate the extensive work you put into this to give us the information. But, you know, I think we need to tread carefully, because property rights are a very, like you say, you don't want to be on a losing end of in the court. Nobody likes to be on the losing end of it, but, you know, property ownership has rights, and you got to be very careful. I'm willing to listen and willing to try and, you know, find a way to nudge people in the right direction, but I'd be very, very hesitant to be too overly aggressive, for sure.
Councilmember Bunker.
I don't think the registry in itself is too onerous or bureaucratic. I mean, it seems like a pretty simple thing to put together, and, you know, if there's a fee once a year, it doesn't seem like that's so difficult. It'd probably be a good idea. I also think there are some people who own property downtown who literally don't live in the world you do, where buying buildings and sitting on them makes sense. That's not everybody, of course, but there are people who have different purposes when they've purchased buildings downtown. I want to ask something that I hear anecdotally from a lot of people, and I believe I read it in the paper a while ago, but didn't St. Pete turn around their downtown by having some sort of fine system set up if you didn't have something in those buildings?
I haven't seen that. I saw that they have something very similar to us, which is if you're blighted property,
Okay.
you're fine for that.
I just wanted to check on that. And is,
I believe they do have a vacant property registry though.
They have a foreclosure property registry, and West Palm Beach has the vacant property.
okay, and is it possible to say that within a business district, we want businesses to open? Can there be a restriction on, say, non-for-profit use at a certain point?
I think that that's gonna come back down to, takings and Harris claims and things of that nature, where we are regulating someone's use of the property to their detriment.
Okay.
And whether it's, for-profit, non-profit, I don't think it really matters.
All right. So if suddenly half of the buildings that are empty now become a nonprofit place, is that going to benefit the downtown?
I couldn't answer that. It may not, but whether or not it benefits it does not allow us to necessarily legislate how the use is done or define it.
Okay.
And I understand that that's a frustrating answer, but the last thing I want to do is go into court, and I've been into all the courts in this county, and I've been into the appellate court that governs this county many times. I know how these judges think, and the last thing I want to do is I want to go in there and get rolled out because we went over what we could probably do. And that's not necessarily for me, because I've been rolled out of court plenty of times, but it's for the client.
I'll give you an answer. It doesn't help us to have more not-for-profits downtown.
Right.
We already have 3 enormous ones. The Church of Scientology, the county, and the city. So it doesn't help. Our mix isn't as robust as we'd like if those properties actually converted. But I will say that people that are irrational that pay 2, 3x for a property are paying taxes on that right now. I don't get it. Again, I think it's irrational, but the fact that they're paying 2, 3 times original market value, at least we are getting the revenues. Now we need to figure out with the CRA how we want to utilize those revenues to benefit the rest of the city and get things occupied. Councilmember Beckman?
Well, from what I understand of the vacant property registration, I'm in favor of it. I think, when Amanda asks, how much time do we spend on collecting information or actually doing things? I would say we need to have an accurate picture to know what we're dealing with, to set goals, to measure goals. And so if we have 500 vacant properties in the city that are zoned for X, what is that number next year? What are we doing to move that needle? And are we reporting back on it? And I would say too, when we look at something as controversial as the Landings property and residents want more housing choices, we want to maintain green spaces, we certainly want more industrial jobs, we want better paying jobs and businesses to come into our community to diversify our tax base. That's fine. And I'm on board with all that. But it would be nice to know when a developer comes in and says, I want that piece of property for X, and we say, wow, we have 18 properties that are zoned for X. Can you check out this area first? Or, we just need accurate information and data, and I don't feel that that's bureaucracy at all. I think it's being very transparent. I need that information to make decisions wisely, and I think our residents want that information. They drive by vacant buildings, they drive by vacant lots, boarded up, businesses, and they want to know, geez, seems like we have so many. Well, how many do we have? It should be easy enough to have that information. I think it's critical. I really do. And I appreciate property owners' rights. They have a right to purchase property and to, do with it what's legally, allowed. But when they sit on it, they bring down everybody else around them. And that, if we have a registration fee that is not punitive, because legally we're not allowed to do that, it's just the administrative costs, and perhaps we can accelerate it a little year by year based on more work that's demanded, I think that's reasonable. I really do. Things haven't worked in the past. Whatever we've tried in the past, there's been a lot of inactivity, especially in our downtown. And so I think it's time to try something different.
I just like to ask
Councilmember
one
Buck.
other question. Scientology and Scientologists did pay 2, 3, and even 4 times the amount of the assessed value of the property. So you say they're paying taxes. Are they now paying taxes on that 3 or 4 times the amount?
Yes.
Or- So it has been assessed at that
Every
amount?
time a transaction occurs, the property gets reappraised.
Okay.
Market value when a transaction occurs. Now, the appraiser does not always appraise right at market or the sale price. There's a discount on almost everything. But also understand that commercial properties are not homesteaded. So they've established, a new market price. That's one of the reasons the CRA's revenue and price increases on land in the CRA was higher than the rest of the city, including the beach, which makes a big difference. So am I hearing interest in doing the registry? I've heard from Councilmember Beckman. What I'd like you to do, Mr. Horn, do you have anything to add? Because what I think we need to do is give some marching orders then to come back with the actual structure of how this would be done, an estimate of how much it would cost, estimate of what the manpower would be required to do it. Do you think that's a reasonable
Yeah,
process?
yes, Mayor, I just don't want you to minimize the administrative load when you're adding it to us.
I am not.
We will automatically do a reprioritization because we have a finite number of staff who is doing certain things. This becomes to the top of the list. Other things will slide down until we get everything the way you want it. Then it gets integrated into our normal activity. But yes, I think what you outlined is probably the direction that we ought to go. Pam had a question.
Is your focus on the CRA area or the entire city?
Mine would be CRA.
What I'm hearing is CRS.
Here.
Okay, so we would limit the impact of this registry. Okay.
And by the way, if a developer comes into Clearwater and says, I need X number of square feet, or a company comes in and they say, I need X number of square feet, our economic development department is already on top of that. Sadly, there have been some developers who have come in, or companies that have come in and said, we need X number of square feet or X acreage, and we haven't had inventory. I wish Ms. Anderson was here to talk about that a little bit, but we could talk about it a future date. Do you need anything else, Amanda?
No, I do just want to be clear that, of course, we will figure out the most effective and efficient way to do whatever the trustees decide. And I would just also ask you to think about, since we can't force people to do certain things with their property, and we have to focus on what we can control, I mean, another path we can take is being more aggressive and acting as a developer of certain properties. So that if it becomes your number one priority to see something happen or a vacant space filled right in the near term, our quickest path to doing that is becoming the owner and building it ourselves. And that's a huge departure from where the CRA has been in the past. Our process right now is try to find those like-minded partners and partner going forward. But, us acting as a single entity is also an option. So we will get this information for you for the next meeting or earlier, and, more things to think about.
Okay. Anything else on this? All right, director's report. Do you have anything?
The only thing I have is please go to downtownclearwater.com and check out the Holiday Extravaganza tab. We have several events, movies, lights. Jazz Holiday Foundation will be taking over Station Square for a series of concerts. We do require registration. Everything will be physically distanced. So unless the state is shut down again, we're going to have safe, fun activities. So please, downtownclearwater.com.
Thank you. Anything else from the trustees? All right, we will adjourn the CRA, call to order the council work session. We do have some service awards, and I see both of those recipients are now in the room. They got a nice 45-minute CRA meeting, so congratulations on that. First, I would like to call forward Tara Kivett from Engineering for 15 years of service. Mr. Horn. Now it's 15 and a half years, right? Because you were supposed to get this in March.
All right, thank you. Do I go around?
No, Mr. Horn has a,
No.
you don't have a write-up?
Until 12.
Okay. Congratulations. Next, we have Regina DeWitt, Gina to all of us, for 25 years of service from the legal department.
Gina DeWitt started with the city as a paralegal to the police legal advisor in 1995. In this position, Gina assisted in forfeiture cases resulting in hundreds of thousands of dollars deposited into the SLEF fund. She also assisted in research for and drafting of numerous complex ordinances such as the Adult Dance Hall Ordinance and the Begging by Intimidation Ordinance. She worked on appellate briefs and performed complex legal research for the city attorney and assistant city attorneys on multiple subjects, including constitutional issues and public records. In July 2001, Gina was promoted to administrative support manager. Since that time, she has been responsible for legal office management, including supervision of support staff, budget, approval of accounts payable and payroll, research, and implementation of hardware and software for department efficiency. In addition, she provides direct secretarial and paralegal support to the city attorney. While handling all these responsibilities, Gina married then police officer Brian DeWitt in 2001 and had her first child months before obtaining her Master of Public Administration degree from USF in 2003. In addition to her normal job responsibilities, Gina volunteered for several special projects for the city. She was volunteer coordinator for the FCCMA TLG conference in 2011. She was co-chair of the Centennial Committee from 2013 to 2015, served on the building committee for the City Hall move, and oversaw clearing out of the Equity Services Department to ensure compliance with public records law. Gina, her husband Brian, daughter Brianna, 17, and son JP, 14, are avid glampers, spending many holidays and vacations enjoying Florida's semi-natural environment. Gina's 25 years of dedicated service to the city is deeply appreciated. Gina DeWitt. Just
Do a fist bump and don't breathe. We love the DeWitt family. They've been great servants to the city of Clearwater, so.
Happy glamping.
Congratulations.
Thank you to all our employees that have reached different anniversaries. We appreciate all their efforts. Item 3.1.
approve a claim service contract with Sedgwick Claims Management Services of Nashville, Tennessee, in the not-to-exceed amount of $100,000 for a one-year term from October 1, 2020 through September 30th, 2021, pursuant to Clearwater Code of Ordinances, Section 2.564, 1I, exempt from bidding, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Osorio.
Thank you, Mr. Horn. Good morning. Rick Osorio, Risk Manager. Risk Management is seeking renewal of our one-year contract from October 1st, 2020 through September 30th of 2021 with Sedgwick Claims Management Services to provide supplementary claim services. Their services for adjustment and administration of city liability and property claims will be beneficial should we incur excessive claims due to a disaster, storm, or other extenuating circumstances. This renewal contract has no changes in terms and pricing from the previous year. Risk Management has retained Sedgwick in the past to fill in for staff shortages, and they have provided professional and excellent claim services. This contract will provide Risk Management and the city greater effectiveness and flexibility in the management of our liability and property claims. The Risk Management Division is respectfully requesting approval of this agreement with Sedgwick Claim Service Management Services and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Councilmember Hamilton.
Just out of curiosity, this is a not to exceed number, but what does this number typically end up being for us? In a normal year, not given, extreme circumstances?
Sure. This past year, we had staff member out for medical leave. We typically handle 300 to 600 claims a year, so we felt like we needed to call them in and use the contract that was in place. This year, we spent $42,000 for the time period that the staff member was out. Fortunately, she came back, but they did a wonderful job for us. It's a good stopgap for us to have in place, and we do the same thing with workers' compensation because we have a small staff of 3. If a workers' compensation risk management specialist is out, then we have commercial risk management as a backup. It's just a safeguard, and so it's been working out really good for us.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Beckman.
So I see that this is a renewal, and so I was just wondering, if we do it this frequently with Sedgwick, can we have a longer contract at a reduced rate? I mean, how frequently do we secure their services annually?
That is definitely an option that we can explore. As far as lower rates, that is the going rate industry-wide for this type of service. We did check with 2 other companies late last year in the midst of this contract just to see what the pricing was so that the city would be competitive. And so their pricing is and expenses that they charge are on track with the industry. As far as a multi-year, we can definitely explore that if you wish. We can definitely do that.
How many years have we contracted with them consecutively?
This will be our 2nd year, if I remember.
Just the
correctly.
2nd year?
Yeah. So.
But it's really an hourly rate based upon usage.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
We monitor everything they do closely. We check their invoices. We make sure that the claims they're managing are the ones supposed to be managing. We only send them new claims or problematic claims while the staff member is out, which is what happened in this situation. So,
Consent?
Yep.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
4.1.
thank you.
Thank you.
Authorize the award of invitation to bid 4720, mobile natural gas tank services to Marlin Gas Services LLC of Spring Hill, Florida, for an initial annual amount not to exceed $250,000, with the option for 2 one-year term extension options at $150,000 annually, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Langell.
Good morning, Brian Langill, Assistant Director for Clearwater Gas System. We've been using Marlin Gas since March of 2019 to service our subdivision up in Pasco County, Bexley Del Webb, and they have been doing a good service for us, and also we've had emergency services that they provided for us up along US Highway 41 in Pasco County. We talked with the finance department and we decided that it was appropriate to bid this item out. However, we're aware that Marlin Gas is the only provider in the Southeast. However, there are other companies that do provide this service in the US. We did that bid and Marlin was the only bidder that was responsive in the bid. So we're asking for you to award this bid item to them. And there's 2 items here. One is the emergency services that we want to have, and that's for $30,000 a year, we're estimating that to be. And also, we have 2 known project sites, one of them being the Bexley Del Webb subdivision that we are actively installing the gas main right now to get to that subdivision. We hope to have that in by the end of this year, 1st of January. However, we are asking for funds up through March of 2021 to be on the safe side. And then also the US Highway 41 project, there's a road construction project that's ongoing up there. We have had 2 line hits so far this year, and we're concerned that we will continue to have more hits as time goes on, and that is a one-way gas feed. And so if we were to lose those customers, that's about 2,000 customers in that area. So we want to have a permanent tank there, and we do a monthly rental throughout the year to ensure that we have a backup supply in case we have another line hit. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Langell? Councilmember Beckman.
It's more of a comment. So I noticed on the bid tabulation attachment that there's a statement that there were no submissions received by certified small businesses, minority women, or disadvantaged business enterprise certified agencies. So I want to thank you for putting that on there. I just wanted some clarification, like from procurement or purchasing. Is that a standard operating procedure now going forward for all departments? Are they gonna indicate that the way, I know there were some contracts on the last city council meeting that had that asterisk and information, but is it going to be citywide?
It is not right now.
No? Okay.
Councilmember Hamilton.
The initial year, the first year is 250, and then the renewal's at 150. What's the additional money?
The
allocation?
first year is for the Bexley Del Webb component. That's the $100,000 that we're estimating through March of 2021. And then after that.
Which you may not even need,
we may not
given the
need that.
progress that's
Correct.
being made. Okay,
Right. We're hoping we don't.
thank you.
Consent?
Yes.
4.2.
Approve an annual general permit with Pinellas County to construct and maintain natural gas facilities and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Langill again.
This is our annual general permit with the county to install gas mains within their right-of-way, in certain portions of their right-of-way. If it's within 5 feet of the curb of the road, we have to do individual permits. This is only about a $2,600 fee agreement. However, there's indemnification language in here that we have to bring to your attention and approval. However, there's no limits. Our limits of liability under statute 768.28 are not waived.
Questions? Consent?
Yes.
4.3.
Ratify and confirm a purchase order in the amount of $137,304 with Technico of Lake Worth, Florida for the purchase of natural gas meters and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Langill again.
So this is a meter bid. We actually did this in June of 2020 for our meters and regulators, and we had this meter on the bid item. However, nobody bid on it. So we had to address it at a later date, which we're doing right now. Unfortunately, Technico, the company that was the authorized agent for selling this meter, wasn't aware of the bid, and then we found out a month later that they were the agent, and so we were in touch with them. However, we did not purchase it at that point in time. It was held off for a couple months here, and then we found out in September that this meter was going to be discontinued in 2021, and we needed to have the order in by the end of October to get the meter quantities secured. The importance of this is that we have 1,500 AMR endpoints, automated meter reading endpoints, that are attached to the top of the meter and relay the information to utility customer service for billing. Those endpoints can only be used on this specific meter that's going to be discontinued, so there was a rush in getting that in there. And so that we asked the city manager to approve this as a ratify and confirm.
Yeah, otherwise I wouldn't understand why we were buying meters that were going to be discontinued.
Right. It's because we do have excess inventory right now that we need to utilize that. And that inventory has a cost of $93,000
Okay.
in our warehouse.
Other questions? Councilmember Beckman?
Okay, so how long do these meters usually last? I'm concerned because Techno indicates that they will only service these through 2023 when we purchase them. So how long do they usually last?
Well, the meters will stay out in the field for at least 10 years. And then we have a full meter shop within our warehouse that does refurbishment of meters. And so we will have, we're purchasing 1,300 meters, but we have 1,500 endpoints, and we're going to have those as extra for maintenance purposes as well. So we will take care of that in-house.
Okay, so we have 1,500 very specific meter reading endpoints that are out there, and we ordered 1,300 meters previously, because we wanted to keep 200 endpoints on the shelf to use for repairs or replacements.
Yes, as we go out in the field, as issues happen or any type of maintenance that needs, if there's a defective endpoint, we want to have a spare one on the shelf. We felt like 200 would be sufficient to meet that.
That seems reasonable. I can follow that thinking. But now we want to order 200 more meters that are no longer going to be manufactured and will have a limited warranty to match up with those endpoints. So that means we're not having any spare inventory just to replace endpoints. I'm wondering, how's that balance? Are we going to have, I worry that maybe we have excess meters that we're purchasing if you had wanted 200 of these meters or endpoint things or whatever, yeah, that you wanted to keep 200 endpoints on the shelf just in case. But now it seems like they're gonna be spoken for with these extra meters you're ordering.
Well, we'll have the 1,300 meters that we purchased now, and we'll install those out in the field as
Needed?
needed. Well, we have over 1,500 new accounts a year that we're installing up in Pasco County, because that's all the new subdivisions.
Okay, I didn't,
So we're growing very rapidly.
they're not gonna sit around.
They're not, oh, no, they're not gonna sit around.
Councilmember
Because
Hamilton.
now, this takes care of short-term, looking long-term, what's the next generation of gas meters? I mean, are we gonna have to be retrofitting or, redoing everybody's gas meter at some point?
Potentially. This is one meter set here, diaphragm meter, which is the traditional meter style for residential. There are other types, rotary, ultrasonic meters and things like that. Right now, cost-wise, these meters are the cheapest, and there are other meter types that we're buying that are under the current bid that we had approved in June of this year that were for residential.
Just ballpark, I'm not gonna hold you to it, but ballpark, how much more expensive is the next generation meter gonna be?
The next generation meter could be, I'm not quite sure, I'd just be guessing on this one here. We're $80 on our current meters. This meter that we're purchasing, we're asking for authorization today is $100 per meter. We might see, maybe a 30%, 40% increase potentially.
Not really concerned because you guys are a business, you guys are probably, the customer's gonna pay the freight on it when it happens, so, but I was just curious. Thank you.
Consent?
Yep.
5.1.
Approve First Amendment to revocable license agreement between the City of Clearwater and Sunsets at Pier 60 Society, Inc. to modify the license area of the agreement and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Halios.
Thank you, Mr. Horn. Good morning, Mayor, Council. Jim Halios, Director, Parks and Recreation. The item we have before you today is a amendment to the revocable license agreement with the Sunsets at Pier 60 that was brought to you in September of 2019. We have this amendment to fix a error that was included in there as far as our use agreement with Sunsets at Pier 60. Initially, the area that we had approved for use for the Sunsets Festival exceeded past the mean high water line, which was in conflict with our submerged land lease with the state of Florida. So this amendment comes back to you to allow us to correct that error. And we've demarcated lines on the pier which show where the mean high water line ends and where the Sunsets at Pier 60 Festival will stop. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Halios? Councilmember Hamilton?
I guess my question is, does the state have a real problem with us being past the mean high water line on the pier itself for this festival? I mean, is it that big of a deal?
Well, traditionally it hasn't been, but it turns out someone from the public had brought up an issue that had conflicted with something else, which in turn led to a discussion on this. And so the state, from the mean high water line out, we are only permitted to have a fishing pier and bait house. So any other type of ancillary activities, the state prohibits it. So in order to be in compliance, we've went ahead and amended it.
So was it Sugar Sands?
As far as the other,
The issue?
Yeah,
Because
that
that's
was
about
in-
the only thing I can think of.
Yes,
goes
that was in
after
part
the
of it,
mean high
and
water
then
mark.
we've had someone bring that up
Okay.
to our attention.
Other questions or comments? Councilmember Beckman?
I had about how much does this company pay to use the pier and run thing?
Well, it's actually, we fund them. It's a grant that's funded, so last year, it started in 2019, it's $18,000 for this budgeted fiscal year with the hope for a reduction of $6,000 per year over the next 3 years, so that way in 3 years, it would be cost neutral. But to generate kind of that atmosphere down at Pier 60 and bring more people in, this is part of an event that, we subsidize, and it's been very successful for us as far as bringing people down to Clearwater and Pier 60 area.
Does go back to when the beach was a different place.
True.
But it's been so successful, it's such a tradition that it's something that people come to just to be a part of. Other questions?
But I guess, I gotta ask, given COVID and pandemic and less crowds and everything, is it going to still, or is Sunset still gonna be able to meet the $6,000 reduction to, or are they gonna ask us to take that out another year or two before we can get it down to zero?
No, that's a good question, and that's something that we'll have to, I'll look into to see how we budget it for this year. But yeah, that is a great point. I mean, with COVID, their ability to, realize that excess income to allow for that $6,000 reduction is certainly inhibited and affected.
Anything else? Consent?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Halio. 6.1.
Approved City of Clearwater staff request to vacate a 30-foot right-of-way easement described in the south 280 foot of the east 30 feet of the following described tract. Commence at the northeast corner of Gulf to Bay Gardens as recorded in Plat Book 50, page 60, Public Records of Pinellas County. Run thence south 89 degrees, 57 feet, 24 inches east, a distance of 200 feet to the point of beginning. Thence south 89 degrees, 57 feet, 24-inch east, a distance of 100 feet. Thence south 0 degrees, 20 feet, 15 inches east, a distance of 300 feet. Thence north 89 degrees, 57 feet, 24-inch west, a distance of 100 feet. Thence north 0 degrees, 20 feet, 15-inch west, a distance of 300 feet to the point of beginning as recorded in OR Book 5870, page 761 of the Public Records of Pinellas County, Florida, and pass the appropriate ordinance on first reading.
You're
Mr.
going to love
President.
these next 4 items.
Oh, yeah, this is really fun.
They're all related.
Good
Please.
morning, Robert Burzak, Real Estate Services Coordinator. This right-of-way easement vacation is a contingency in the land exchange contract between city and creative contractors. The right-of-way easement will be null and void should the closing not occur and is subject to the city's reservation of new easements as provided for in the contract. City stakeholders have reviewed the right-of-way easement vacation request and have no objection. Questions?
Questions? Councilmember
I
Hamilton.
guess the only question I can ask is, Pam, is there something we can do that doesn't require that kind of thing to be read for the item? I mean, because nobody has a clue what that says.
Well, there's no street address for this,
Correct.
so we have to give the location.
Illegal.
And this is one of those where there just isn't a better way.
Just say, well, it's
We
behind
have
this address and in front of this, and gee, my knees.
But we have looked at it, but rather than have it invalidated later,
It looks painful for Mr. Horn to read.
well, wait till Miss Aiken.
Wait till Ms. Aiken has to read the ordinance. I don't feel sorry for you.
Other questions?
I have,
Councilmember
just,
Beckman?
this is pretty simple, I'm sure I should know this, but when we vacate easements, because there's this one and there are a couple that are coming up, do we take any inventory of the mature trees or anything that are there as we vacate our controller easement? No.
Number next, 6.2.
Approved City of Clearwater staff request to vacate a 20-foot drainage and utility easement and a 15-foot drainage and utility easement described correspondingly as the north 20 feet and south 15 feet of the following described tract. Commence at the northeast corner of Gulf to Bay Gardens as recorded in Plat Book 50, page 60, Public Records of Pinellas County, Florida. Run thence south 89 degrees, 57 feet, 24 inches east, a distance of 200 feet. To the point of beginning, thence south 89 degrees, 57 feet, 24-inch east, a distance of 100 feet. Thence south 0 degrees, 20 feet, 20 inches,
It's gotta be 20 feet.
20 feet, 15 inches east, a distance of 300 feet. Thence northeast 89 degrees, 57 feet, 24 inches west, a distance of 100 feet. Thence north 0 degrees, 20 feet, 15 inches west, a distance of 300 feet, to the point of beginning as recorded in OR Book 5858, page 1539 of the Public Records of Pinellas County, Florida, and pass the appropriate ordinance on first reading. Is that 20 inches, 15 inches?
It should be 20 feet.
Yeah, 20 feet, so that's an error, okay.
It's a typo.
Okay.
This drainage and utility easement vacation is also a contingency in the land contract between the city and creative contractors. Happy to answer any questions.
Same property, just different
Same exact
locations.
property, different location.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions?
I do. Very good. So the language says drainage and utility easements are not necessary. And it's a drainage and utility easement vacation, meaning that this property is now available for development. So can you help me understand what type of development might go there, and what does a contract in exchange for real property mean?
There's already an existing contract between the city and creative contractors.
Okay.
They're going to be building their corporate headquarters there.
Okay.
These vacations just kind of clear up title. With the city is going to be reserving some additional easements in the deed.
So they're going to build corporate headquarters there.
This was the land swap that we did with Creative. We're getting their office building right by the trail on Drew Street. They're getting this piece of land that we owned at the time.
Okay.
Yeah,
And this is now getting the land, getting easements and everything done so that they can build their new headquarters.
Okay. And they're a developer, creative contractors, is that what they do? What is their business? That's what they do?
They're contractors,
They're
they're a general
contractors.
contractor.
Okay, yeah. And so how many jobs do we think, do we have any idea, or how?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
He's a big builder. He built the library at the,
Oh,
he did the
He's building the
library at
aquarium.
St. Pete College. He had something to do with the aquarium. They're big.
USF, but the problem is it's not new jobs.
Yes.
They're just moving locations within the city of Clearwater.
okay.
Not a problem. I mean, we're glad they're staying in the city.
Yes, definitely.
They have outgrown their location.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Consent?
No, it's an ordinance.
Got an ordinance.
6.3,
Approve City of Clearwater staff request to vacate portions of a 15-foot drainage and utility easement and a 10-foot drainage and utility easement described correspondingly as the east 15 feet of the west 545 feet of the southwest 1/4 of the northeast 1/4, section 17, township 29 south, range 16 east, less the south 285 feet, and the east 10 feet of the west 730 feet of the southwest 1/4 of the northeast 1/4 of section 17, township 29 south, range 16 east, less the 330 feet as recorded in OR Book 4082, page 117 of the Public Records of Pinellas County, Florida, and pass the appropriate ordinance on first reading. Where's Zach again?
Thank you. Same thing here. Drainage and utility easement vacation is also a contingency in the land exchange contract between the city and creative contractors. Yeah.
questions?
Questions?
6.4,
Approve City of Clearwater staff request to vacate a 20-foot drainage and utility easement described as the north 20 feet of the east 200 feet of the west 730 feet of the southwest 1/4 of the northeast 1/4 of section 17, township 29 south, range 16 east, as recorded in OR Book 5950, page 1028 of the Public Records, Pinellas County, Florida, and pass the appropriate ordinance on first reading.
Another one. The drainage and utility vacation easement is also a contingency in a land exchange contract. For the answer question.
any questions? Vice Mayor?
How come this wasn't combined with the other utility and drainage easement that's right next to it? That we just talked about?
It was a separate OR,
Okay.
this record. There will be another one reserved in the same location, just a little bit larger on the deed.
Any other questions? 6.5,
Accept sovereignty submerged land lease renewal 520345063 with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection Bureau of Public Lands for use of state-owned land under 3 boat slips to be used for mooring rescue vessels at 700 Bayway Boulevard, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Burzak, again.
This lease renewal authorizes the city of Clearwater to use state-owned bottom land for the city of Clearwater's 3 boat slips located behind the Clearwater Police Substation at 700 Bayway Boulevard in the Clearwater Harbor. There's no fee associated with this lease renewal, and the new lease will expire on November 5th, 2024. 3-slip docking facility with a boat lift is used to be exclusively for mooring rescue vehicles. City stakeholders support the acceptance of this lease renewal.
Any questions? Consent? 6.6.
Accept a sidewalk easement from Modern Estates, Inc. for the repair, maintenance, and replacement of a sidewalk on real property located at 635 Woodlawn Street, and adopt the appropriate resolution. You have this one too?
That's mine as well.
Okay, good.
That's for mine, though. The sidewalk easement will allow the city rights for repair, maintenance, and replacement of a sidewalk as the 635 Woodland Avenue site is developed for single-family housing.
Any questions? All right, we'll talk about that one on Thursday, 7.1.
Approve a professional services agreement and work order with Wanamaker Jensen Architects, Inc. of St. Petersburg, Florida, per RFQ 31-20 for Fire Station 47 in the amount of $445,869, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Chief Ellers.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Scott Elders, Fire Chief, Clearwater Fire and Rescue. This item before you is to request approval of the professional services agreement for Wanamaker Jensen Architects in the amount of $445,869 for the design of Fire Station number 47. This station is to be located across from Clearwater High School on Hercules Avenue, in which we were able to purchase the land in October of 2019. In June of this year, an RFQ was issued for design of the new station, in which Wanamaker Jensen was selected by the committee. The request was for a design to incorporate 4 bays to allow our operational component of an engine, a rescue or a medic unit in this case, and the squad, which is centrally located in the city, because that puts us right in a good spot for traveling east and west for one unit to get to everywhere in the city, along with numerous sustainable enhancements. Currently, Wanamaker and Jensen is designing Fire Station number 46 in the North Beach area. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the chief? Councilmember Beckman.
Is Wanamaker Jensen, it seems like we use them quite a bit. Are they the ones who gave us estimates for the main library renovation?
No, ma'am. I don't know about the main library. I know we've only used them for 46 and 47, so I can't answer.
Not yet.
They did not? Okay. Thanks. That's all.
Tara, do you want to explain some of the different architectural firms? Just for information purposes, I think it might be helpful.
Okay, well, per our procurement guidelines for any project over CCNA thresholds of, I think it's 4 million now, that was recently changed from 2 million, we have to put out an RFQ, a request for qualifications, soliciting a architectural firm. So we do that versus picking one of the firms on our roster. And so through that process, I was not on the selection committee, but it comprised of an engineering rep, Jeff Walker is the project manager, usually someone from building and maintenance is involved. And so it really varies depending on the project, on what architectural firms submit. So we just look at their past projects, we look at their references that they include to see how they've done on other projects. We ask them different questions, they come in and do a presentation, and then we select that firm. And I think Parks and Rec has used Wanamaker Jensen more than some of the other departments. We don't necessarily, if it was our roster, we might look at a bunch of different firms, but since it's a project-specific response to an RFQ, they're really looked at individually for that project. So it can vary on the different types of firms that submit.
Thank you.
I hope I addressed that.
Any other questions? Consent?
Yes.
All right, 7.2. Thank you, Chief.
Approve the CARES Act funding agreement between Pinellas County and the City of Clearwater for public assistance support for COVID-19 expenditures and allow the city manager or designee to enter into, approve, and execute same and any future modifications of COVID-19 expenditures. Assistant Chief Grant.
Good morning, Javon Graham, Division Chief Emergency Management. This federal government passed the CARES Act March 27, 2020 to give relief of public health and economic impacts of COVID-19. Department of Treasury is the federal awarding agency with Pinellas County, and as Pinellas County is the primary recipient of these funds that are being awarded to the county. City of Clearwater is the sub-recipient and has been approved to receive up to $1,408,513 and is awarded as a grant to pay for reimbursement necessary expenditures incurred due to COVID-19. At this point, I'm open to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Chief Graham? Councilmember Beckman.
So on page 2 of your document, it says, and you just said that we're allocated from the counties 170,100,000, whatever. We get 1,408,000. How much of that have we seen?
We haven't seen any of it yet. That's what this will allow us to start receiving these reimbursements.
Okay, and we need to have it spent by December 30th of this year?
Well, most of it has already been spent.
It's already been
correct.
allocated?
This is already money that we spent out from the beginning of the event from March 1st. And so we're just trying to get reimbursement for a portion of what we spent, and this still isn't all of what we spent.
So our total award will not cover all of what we've spent?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. Will the 1,400,000 and some thousand, that will cover, have we spent more than that?
We spent almost a little more than $3 million at this point.
Okay.
We're hoping that in a future bill, we may get more money that rolls.
There's a lot of
not
changes
through the
with
counties,
this.
but to the cities themselves. So we'll see if Congress can actually make a decision. Probability is not great. Questions beyond that? Consent? All right. 8.1.
Approve the annexation, initial future land use map designations of residential low and water drainage feature and initial zoning atlas designation of low-medium density residential district for 2079 Bernice Drive and approve the appropriate ordinances on first reading. Mr. Guevara.
Good morning, Diego Guevara, Senior Planner. This voluntary annexation petition involves one parcel of land totaling 0.34 acre occupied by a single-family dwelling. The applicants are requesting the annexation in order to receive sanitary sewer and solid waste service from the city. The property is located within enclave and is contiguous to existing city limits to the north. It is proposed that the property be assigned a future land use map designation of residential low, water drainage feature, and zoning atlas designation of low medium density residential. The applicant has paid the sewer impact and assessment fees and is aware of the additional cost to extend the city sewer service to this property. Collection of solid waste will be provided by the city of Clearwater.
Any questions? 8.2. Thank you.
Approve a development agreement between Key Clearwater LLC, the property owner, and the city of Clearwater, providing for the allocation of 3 units from the hotel density reserve pursuant to Beach by Design, authorize the appropriate officials to execute same and adopt resolution 20-39. Mr. Perry.
Thank you.
Once again.
Mark Perry, Planning and Development. If it's all right, I'd like to combine this agenda item and the next one as sort of one presentation since they're pretty well intertwined.
Okay.
Just to start out, there have been no changes or additional submittals for either of these two applications since this council meeting a couple of weeks ago. The proposal essentially still remains to allocate 3 units from the reserve to parcel A and 2 units to parcel B, and also to split what was once 2 separate parcels and has been combined into one back into 2 separate parcels. That'll bring it into compliance with Beach by Design. All of the changes are essentially interior to the building. The only exterior changes that anyone will notice will be about 1,800 square feet of additional outdoor dining area on the north side of parcel A and the west side of parcel A. If there are any questions, I'd like to try to answer them.
Any questions on item 8.2 or 3? Do you need to read the 8.3 description?
No, we didn't do it last time.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Perry.
Thank you.
9.1.
Approve a purchase order with Carousel Industries, Inc. for purchase and installation of a Vesta 911 portable command post in the amount of $117,906.94. Annual maintenance of Avaya software and hardware for the city's PBX phone switch in the amount of $71,000 pursuant to Clearwater Code of Ordinances, Section 2.5641D, exceptions to bid, other government entities bid, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Mayor.
Mayor, council members, Dan Mayer, IT Director. This is one of the last portions of the EOC, the new build-out for the EOC at Station 48. It allows us to move our call takers from the PD main to that facility in the event of a Category 5 or a great structural threat type event. So we use Carousel because they were bid by the county. We also use Carousel for our own maintenance. So there's two different approval amounts on here for those two different functions.
Questions for Mr. Mayor? Vesta 911, exciting stuff, Dan. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thank you.
All right, consent?
Approve joint participation agreement, JPAG 1093, between the City of Clearwater and the State of Florida Department of Transportation. Authorize the appropriate officials to execute same and adopt resolution 20-58. Mr. McDonald.
Good morning, everyone. Mike McDonald, Marine and Aviation. I'm here today because the current security cameras and support equipment have surpassed their useful life at the Clearwater Airport. We are asking you to approve this grant that will allow us to replace the outdated equipment. FDOT's Joint Animated Project Improvement Programs allows us to replace this system, with FDOT covering 80% of the cost. We're going to be utilizing the current infrastructure that we have there, and of course IT is going to support it. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? These are the type of grants, though, that obligate us, just so you know, to keep the air park open, because we keep getting the grants and we have to be operating for X number of years after we get the grants, and we've got, how many, I mean?
We have quite a few, and we have quite a few in the pipeline too.
The staff does a good job of leveraging those dollars, so.
Absolutely.
Okay. No other questions? 11.1.
Council members, for your discussion today for the advisory boards, I'd like to have the discussion framed around the non-quasi or non-regulatory boards. The city's advisory board program has 16 active regulatory and non-regulatory boards. So in your agenda pack, I've identified those boards that are non-regulatory, non-quasi judicial, that would require a code change if you wish to make any amendments to those boards. The agenda item also includes what the board's mission and purpose based on code. So you will notice I also included a copy of what our list of all the advisory boards and what, it's just a short highlight. You will see that it's quite different in the code. The code has not been amended since most of these boards were created back in 1980 or beyond that. And they have not been updated since then. So I don't know if you want to go board by board, or I will allow you to open that discussion.
Any questions for Ms. Call before we endeavor upon this? So this was one of the things that that was asked to be talked about during our philosophy discussion. We decided to have these as separate. So I think Councilmember Beckman, this was one of your concerns.
Yeah, it is. I think we can utilize our advisory boards better than what we are. I think when I was first elected in the first few months, I sent out emails to all the the advisory board members, and asked them to give me some feedback on what they do, what they like about the board. Do they have any suggestions? And I copied that for our administrator, Patty, so I think you all had access to some of those responses. But a lot of people feel like, or a few people feel like they want to do more. They weren't really sure what they were there for. They didn't meet as frequently, and just wanted some more direction and a little more power, I think, or a little more influence or weight to their work. And so one of the things I think about especially is to work collaboratively with those boards. Those boards, I understand, are supposed to serve us. They advise us as council members. And so where are they getting their direction or guidance from? Are we giving them a task to do some research? Are they coming at us and saying, wow, we're hearing this in the community. We'd really like to investigate this and come, back to you with a recommendation? I don't see any kind of flow of information and collaboration with those boards. And I think that's, I think that's a missed opportunity to engage residents and work collaboratively with the people who we serve, who live in our city. And I think an example, one little example is there was a little dust up last year, I think, about a potential renaming of Coachman Park. And I remember being at the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, and it was like at a 4 o'clock, I think, in the afternoon meeting, and there was nobody in attendance, and a lot of times because of the time of the meetings, but they were just asked to kind of approve a name change and weren't given direction to go out and ask the public, what do you think about a name change of Coachman Park or to Coachman Commons or whatever. So there's that example, and then there's the fresh example of the landings where the Air and Marine Advisory, or the Air Park wasn't consulted, and Parks and Rec and the Environmental Advisory Board. And I know we're in the middle of COVID, but these are important functions and again, missed opportunities. So I would like to engage more with our advisory boards. I think they can be a big asset. The other thing I hope for, well, we can discuss that. I got other little things, but so yeah, what do you think about? I don't know, in the past, have you guys given direction to advisory boards? Like, hey, we're thinking of building another rec center, or, putting outdoor basketball courts in North Greenwood. What does the community think? Park and Rec Board, can you go check that out and get a feel and report back?
In the past, there have been cycles where different boards were more energized because of a specific potential forthcoming project. Parks and Rec is a good example where they would, we would be talking about a new project, or for instance, we had something on the penny list that was coming closer to fruition, and that would be a focus. There are also times, and please jump in, there were also times with advisory boards that they obviously took up a topic that was near and dear to their hearts, and that became a focus as well. It has been, I've only been back as long as you have. It has been an unusual period with a lot of the boards not meeting because there hasn't been essential reasons to meet, and therefore we want to keep people safe, and so they have not been meeting as often. We also normally would get an opportunity to meet with all the advisory boards once a year and thank them for their service, which I think was an energizing opportunity, and we would always get a fair amount of feedback. Again, that's gone by the wayside until COVID is gone. Good news today, Moderna came out with a 96% efficacy on their vaccine, which is even better than Pfizer's, which was 90. So they're expecting that the whole country could be inoculated by the end of the second quarter, which is great news. Councilmember Hamilton, do you want to?
Well, the advisory boards, it's kind of, I've always been operated under the belief that we put people on the advisory boards to get, and we like, to try and get they are kind of our litmus test for the community. They each have their own opinions on the advisory board. To tell the advisory board, well, you need to go out in the community and find out what they say. Well, then why are we, I think it's an additional step. Rarely, advisory boards, when there's an issue that comes from, how do we determine, I guess one of the things is, how do you determine what item should be addressed by what board? Because, there's some, how far out do the tentacles extend to do it? The airport, airport advisory board, Airpark Advisory Board, did they need to be approached by the landings, because the landings project didn't affect their operation at the way it was being presented, so it really wasn't part of their operation. So is that something they needed to be consulted about? I don't know. I look at our advisory boards and I just kind of have I appreciate everybody's service, and, COVID is creating a whole new conundrum of issues, but we always look at advisory board recommendations and take them very serious. Very rarely, I can't, you can probably count on one hand in all the time I've been here that we haven't agreed with an advisory board position on an issue. So I don't, I'm almost kind of with the advisory boards. If it ain't broke, what is it we're trying to fix?
Well, I want them to feel like they're being listened to and effective. I don't know that I'm willing to give additional authority. That's a word that makes me a little bit queasy. And the reason being, the advisory boards are not elected. We are elected, and the citizens gave us the authority to make decisions on their behalf. I want to take under advisement the opinions of the advisory boards, but I am not prepared to give them the authority to make a decision that we're going to have to abide by. I don't even know if that would be allowed, Pam. My guess is it would not. I think what we need to do is make certain that they are being effective, that they're getting the resources. I think what you've seen over the years is, when you have an energized chairperson, they tend to do more, and it really is a function of the people that are on the advisory board and the issues that are top of mind within the city. When there's been an air park issue, go back to when we had, sadly, some plane crashes. The Air Park Advisory Board was very energized about flight patterns and ways that they could try to mitigate future accidents. And there were different policies and procedures that were looked at, when we had, for instance, I wasn't a part of the vote, but the Morningside Rec Center or some of the other rec centers that were kind of on the block to be built, the Parks and Rec Board was very active. Several times throughout the different iterations for Coachman Park, I think you've seen the Environmental Advisory Board and the Parks and Rec Board be very active. And some of those referendums passed and some of them did not. So, Vice Mayor, do you have anything you want to add?
I think that this year really, I agree with Councilman Hamilton. It's been a very different year for advisory boards. We used to have more participation with council and advisory boards. Just the mere fact that we had more integration with everything. We'd see them out at different functions. They could talk to us. Now we really don't have that this year. Hopefully we get back to it next year. I did see one meeting of the Parks and Rec Board that was, it seemed like the board was very frustrated with what they didn't seem that if they had anybody listening to what they were saying, and that concerned me. But that's the only that was the only thing that really stood out to me of all the advisory boards. And I think that, you know, in response to that, I think we remedied that. But, you know, I agree. I think that advisory boards are advisory. They shouldn't have any more power than coming to us, and we should listen to what they say. And from the past, it seems like we take that information and pretty much run with it. So,
Councilmember Hamilton.
Well, I guess the question for Rose is, as far as the advisory board go, how far in advance are the members of the boards notified of the agenda of the upcoming meeting?
We try to give them the agenda at least a week, just like council, a week prior to the meeting.
Okay.
They are aware of their meeting dates. And just for clarification, even though all these boards actually meet quarterly, if there is a need for them to take action prior to their next quarterly meeting, their liaison knows to reach out to me and we can schedule a special meeting if there is a need. But for the most part, they meet.
I would almost, you know, maybe we try and tweak that a little bit where the staff person who, because all these boards have a staff person that attends.
Yes, each board has their own staff liaison. I think one of the issues is there are boards created to advise council.
Mm-hmm.
So if the direction isn't being given by council, then staff is in a position of trying to create an agenda just so that they meet.
Mm-hmm.
And I can understand where that can be frustrating because they're not really advising staff, they're to advise council.
Well, like I said, I'm thinking that if we can get that kind of tweaked, instead of getting it out a week ahead of time, if we can work to get that out a couple weeks ahead of time, since they meet quarterly for most of them, give them a couple weeks, they know what the agenda items are. That gives each individual advisory board member 2 weeks to speak to their friends and whatnot about items on the upcoming agenda so that they get a little bit of a pulse of their portion of the community, so that when they come to that advisory board meeting, you know, they can express what they're hearing. But, you know, if you get it a week ahead of time, you've got a week to talk. If you get it 2 weeks ahead of time, you've got a little extra time to speak to that many more people if you get the opportunity.
Councilmember Bunker.
So how is this set up? How often do they report back to us? Do they come here, or are we given written notices?
Typically, what will happen is when they meet, council will be provided a copy of their draft minutes. But they're also, for the most part, they would typically come once a year and provide a report at a council meeting. So there is that annual face-to-face in addition to the annual appreciation dinner.
Mr. Horn?
Just a couple of things. One of the reasons we shifted to a quarterly meeting schedule is that at that point in time, and I can't remember what year that was, but really the advisory boards were just not meeting. I mean, not only were they not meeting, but they really weren't doing much. And of course, we have a staff liaison who is connected to them, but the staff has not been advocating items for the advisory boards unless there was a particular activity that required the advisory boards to act on. If, for example, Parks and Rec, when there's some naming, activity, then we would energize the Park and Rec Advisory Board, and they would perform their function, and the results of their action would then come to the council. So just as I was thinking about how effective this schedule was occurring, we kind of ran into COVID. But my concern is that, two. One is the meeting schedule should be effective enough so that the advisory council, if they're doing work, it can come to the board. But more importantly, we should be responding to what the advisory board, has as part of their agenda. Because, staff is not really advocating, we're just facilitating. So if the board doesn't do anything, if the board doesn't have an issue, then nothing happens. And so my concern is from a council perspective, when you look at the charter responsibilities, some of these boards aren't really doing this. And so the question is, do you want them to do what the charter says their basic mission and responsibilities are?
We also didn't want to have advisory board meetings just to have them,
Correct.
because we wanted to be respectful of the advisory board members' time. I mean, meeting to meet is
Exactly.
really kind of silly. So that was also an issue at one point. I don't know if we've moved the ball much, but
Well, I've got more. I mean, if we're going to have a discussion. So, we ask about topics of this topic, which board should it go to? And I know you might roll your eyes, but I would just say that the Environmental Advisory Board should probably be involved in almost every decision. The environment is impacted by all sorts of major decisions that we make every single day. So that's just, I had to put that out there. But there is overlap. There is Parks and Rec and Environmental Advisory Board, so it's okay to have overlap. Comments about we're in a different time now with COVID, there's no denying it. However, the examples that I brought up were certainly applicable way before March last year, and advisory boards were not informed that there were discussions going on about the landings or that there were discussions going on about renaming Coachman Park or whatever. So, and those are just two little examples that I am aware of. And that needs to be on the front end. And we need to advertise these meetings and promote them. And the other thing is, I think, you all, brought it up. It's like, well, what's going on here? I think we set the agenda for these advisory boards. Mr. Horn's saying staff is there to kind of facilitate and be the liaison, but we are the ones who give direction and set the agenda and say, hey, this is important to us. I would like, us to have a discussion about this, or could you, do some investigating? I'll do some investigating. And then we need to also be respectful of that advisory board. And I'm going to use the environmental one because, that's near and dear to my heart. It's not a secret. But, we should contact the members of the advisory board and say, hey, guys, what's on your mind? What do you think we can do better in the city of Clearwater? What would you like discussed? I'm sure they have a ton of ideas. We had the single-use plastics that came up before us. We had Ocean Allies certification that came before the Environmental Advisory Board a year or so ago. We can make some more progress with those things. And I'm confident that people on that board, or the Parks and Rec Board, have ideas. And so it's our responsibility, I think, to reach out, engage, set direction for that agenda, get those people enthused and excited about working with us and giving us information, sharing information. And I would, and I don't know if I misspoke, but I don't want to give them authority. Certainly, they didn't run or campaign, but I want to give them more respect and weight for their opinions and have them, be heard. And so I think we can do a better job. I mean, I'm willing to step up and, I've attended those meetings and listened in on a recent Parks and Rec Zoom meeting, but I think that's part of our responsibility. I mean, clearly, it's been communicated that staff doesn't set the agenda. And so we need to do it, and far ahead of time too, right? As Councilmember Hamilton said, to engage the public, let them know what we're going to be talking about, and rally the troops and come before us. So I think there's great potential in our advisory boards to have people feel energized and engaged. And as we focus on, some more diversity of representation on our advisory boards, I think that can only be good. So I think it's on us to do that. What do you guys think?
Ms. Call, you had something you
I just
wanted
wanted to comment regarding the meeting notifications. All our meetings are posted online as well as the agendas, and I've worked really hard the last couple of years to try to work with staff to make sure that those agendas are created and treated just like they would for a council meeting. But in terms of, like, for instance, the Coachman Park renaming, that was an advertised meeting. That's because of council policy. It requires us to advertise a public hearing to rename the park. And as you can see, advertising is not the most, newspaper advertising is not the most effective, and we post it online. We even share it with public communications. So that, I understand the concern that nobody knows, but we are doing everything that we can and what we are required by law to advise the community that there are items that may be of interest to them.
Okay. Other conversation?
Well, could we like each take one or two advisory boards and be the council liaison to them to share tasks or topics?
I don't know that I would support that, and here's the reason. I know what ones you'd probably want, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, before we task an advisory board to do something, I think there needs to be consensus that that's the direction we want to go. So we may not all agree on every single advisory board, and if you have responsibility for that advisory board and send them down a path that may not be the consensus of the rest of the group, then that's going to cause issues.
I get that. I didn't mean it like that. I meant it more like if we polled each other during a work session or something and said, so it's in public, or what if I said to you, sent an email and said, hey, the Environmental Advisory Board is asking for some topics of discussion by next Thursday. Can you all send them in? I mean, that's what I meant, like as a liaison. Or we could, discuss it during a work session and say, hey guys, what are we thinking we want the brownfields to, advisory board or the Parks and Rec or whatever to work on this quarter.
I mean, I think we can be more active about trying to anticipate what we would want advisory boards specifically to look at. I mean, the landings failed. Councilmember Hamilton has talked about expanding the air park onto the landings.
Well, let me clarify. I would love to see nothing more than the landings remain a golf course forever, because I love golf. I do. But if economically it becomes impossible to maintain it as a golf course, then I think it needs to be a revenue generator for the city. It needs to be able to sustain itself and not be something that we have to put money into.
I'm just using that as an example.
But no, so people understand my position. I'm not sitting here saying I want a bigger air park. I want it to stay a golf course. But if it can't be a golf course, then it needs to be something that pays its own freight instead of sucking money out of our budget. So,
is there anything that precludes us from communicating with any advisory board? Like, I can go to the meetings and I've emailed members and asked them, what are their experiences? So certainly I can look and see when their meetings are and say, hey, fellas, these are some of my concerns as a council member. I'd like to, find out if you care about these similar things, right? I mean, legally I can do that?
Bill? Pam? I mean,
certainly, any individual council member can attend the meetings. You have to be very cautious about giving direction because individually you have no authority to give direction. Direction comes from this body as a whole by vote. So I would be very careful about the appearance that you are giving individual direction to a board when you do not have the authority to do that.
Okay. So in the past, we haven't given any direction? We don't remember?
that's not true.
Oh, okay.
I mean, again, I've been here as long as you have this go around, but many times in the past, and the vice mayor and council member Hamilton can speak to it more recently, but we used to constantly give direction to different advisory boards for opinions or to take a deeper dive because that was their area of passion and expertise, and then bring us back recommendations. That does not mean that we will always follow. I want to set expectations that just because an advisory board comes back with a recommendation does not necessarily mean we're going to follow it. But it does give us more data in which to make our decisions.
I agree.
And I don't think I've ever given an advisory board my opinion of where they should be, going. I mean, that's their job, is to give discussion and then give us opinion of what they think is the best thing, and then we have the option to follow that or not.
So you want them to set their own agenda?
Well, I think through staff, I mean, if there's
In the past, typically where the council has given some direction to an advisory board is if we had an agenda item that was in their area of specialty. I gave you a classic example. There was a time when we had a number of issues that surfaced that involved the Marine and Advisory Board. So what the council said was, when this item comes back, would you please make sure that the Marine Advisory Board have a chance to discuss it, and if they had, we'd like to get their input if they have any. So we had to restructure the timing of things so that the Marine Advisory Board could meet, and then staff liaison would present the item of concern. They would they would discuss it, provide a recommendation. When the item came back to council, then the council would have that particular input. Now that has happened a number of times over my 20 years. And that's where the council tends to be rather focused on what it wants the advisory board to do. I'll just tell you, just based on the conversation we're having right now, there are a couple of things I think we need to do. First of all, I think the boards need to do what the code says is their mission and responsibility. So I can direct the liaison staff members to really review this with the advisory boards and at least give us some feedback as to what kind of activities should the boards be focused on, and that will, I think, create some opportunity for the boards to come to the council if there are any issues or concerns consistent, with that. Number two, we're probably going to have to look at the frequency of meetings. That's going to have an impact on the board members, and it's going to have an impact on the staff. So again, in an era where we're trying to prioritize, staff activity, this is going to take up a little bit more time as we get into this arena based around the meetings. Because there may be some advisory boards that feel like a quarterly meeting is not enough. And if that's the case, then that's more administrative tasking that has to get involved in accommodating them. I mean, we're in COVID, so we could possibly do it virtually, if this frequency needs to be increased. But I think at some point COVID's not going to be with us, so we're going to be more in the in-person environment, and so some of those meetings will be a lot easier to schedule. But those are the two things that I think we should focus on.
And I would prefer that council members bring forward specific topics that they want an advisory board to weigh in on. I think that is a way, we go through cycles where advisory boards are very active and then some of the people change. And, different people have different motivational levels. And then things kind of draw down a little bit, and there's not as much interest, and then somebody comes in that's more energized, or we have a topic. I mean, the Marine Advisory was perfect, Bill, because back when we were doing the Marina, we had some people that were on that particular board who had tremendous expertise, and they said, if you do this way, you're going to run into some issues with the way you tie off boats and the different lengths of slips and all sorts of things. They had really great expertise because they were in the industry, and they were additive to the process. But I think we ought to think about things that we specifically would like to task different boards with, and I have several in mind. So it's not a matter of, a lack of things that we would like them to pursue beyond just their normal agenda. I think there's things that different boards could be looking at. Because I think around the landings, we had questions that I don't think anybody really had a great answer, that a lot could go back into. I mean, I think we probably ought to create more of a standard of what we believe should be the amount of open space recreation. And oh, by the way, what's the definition? Because I heard an awful lot of different definitions from different people depending on what point of view they had and how they wanted to construct their argument for or against. So that would be an example that I would be happy to go back to the EAB and Parks and Rec and have them. And those might have very different opinions on what is open space rec, but that would be something I'd be comfortable tasking them with and coming back with information.
I think that's a great idea. So do you think we should use time during work sessions to bring up, if we're thinking of a particular task for a board, we'd bring it up during this type of a format, talk about it, and then send it on?
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
I had a couple other things. Did Councilmember Hamilton, you look like you had
No, well, the only thing I'm thinking along those lines, though, I mean, we gotta be careful, like, how much do we send to the environmental board? I mean, when somebody comes in with submits an application, staff reviews that and goes through their process, and the environmental is one of the things that staff pays attention to. But, we can't just say everything has to come back and go to the environmental board because of the amount of time. We already catch enough, for, how slow and how unresponsive we are. If we're gonna add that layer to it, we're done.
But also the professional expertise. EAB does not have
Yeah.
professional standards for their members. So they may be very passionate, and some of them may have experience in those areas, but staff are the professionals who are reviewing those applications. So it would not be appropriate based on the code as well.
I appreciate that. So that's one of the things I just, that popped into my head. It wasn't anything.
Councilmember Bunker.
Well, yeah, I think it makes sense for us to talk about issues that we might want to suggest that they look into. Because when I look at, like the library board, it says the library board shall make recommendations to the city commission concerning all matters pertaining to the management and use of the library system, including establishment of rules and regulation governing the privilege of the use of the library by members of the public. So, do they just meet occasionally and go, how can we make the library better? Do you have some ideas? And then everyone looks around and says, well, it's running pretty smoothly, I think. It doesn't seem like they really have a direction, but I could be wrong. There could be passionate people on that library board who are saying, these are areas where we could improve. I'm just not, apparently I'm not looking closely enough at my emails, but that information isn't getting to me.
Mr. Horn.
Well, the library boards, and we've had 3 different groups that have been very actively involved in their relationship with the library staff. Rarely is there anything that comes forward that the library boards don't get a chance to react to. That's just been part of the nature of the relationship. But I even think the library boards themselves have gone through somewhat of a change, over the past several years. They don't seem to be as active as they used to be. But again, we can easily address that issue.
You said you had a couple other things?
Yeah, I still think the application form is pretty weak, that we're given. I think it could be improved a little bit, and I would like to see applicants for the advisory board come before us physically and just, say a few words or introduce themselves before we vote on them. I just don't, there's there's an uncomfortable feeling with choosing people just based on paper, but then when you think about it, we're tasked to go out and recruit for these boards, right? And so we go out and recruit, and if we all recruit somebody for, the Marine Advisory Board, and I've got my candidate and you all have yours, I mean, that's kind of tough. The other thing is, I think we should have some justification for who we are, supporting and wanting on that board, and we should be able to articulate, at least from that application, why that person is your chosen one. That hasn't been at the last meeting a little bit. There was, I just didn't, it didn't feel good. And then the other thing was, I don't think we should, and again, I need to review this for Robert's rules or whatever. I don't like the idea of making a motion to approve 2 members to a board at the same time. I think they should be individual appointments. And so that's just my suggestion. I think I'd like
Okay.
to.
Any comments?
Well, I think in reference to your reference of our last meeting, I think you're probably alluding to Mr. Kohut.
Yeah.
I looked at Mr. Kohut, and my personal feeling was he was better suited for the, I'm trying to remember now which board we put him on. Code enforcement, because of his interaction that we've had with him, and what he tries to, what he has brought forward to us and whatnot. I thought that was a much better fit for him rather than Community Development Board. I thought he fit that board better, and that's why I did not support it.
And I appreciate that. And when I look back after that meeting, I wished I would have followed up and just, because you did mention something like his interactions with the city, and I don't know what those were. I should have asked at that time, well, can you expand? So I didn't.
But we've,
I think there's objective and subjective information, especially for those of us who've been around a little longer. I mean, truth be told. And I'm a little bit I don't know about the in-person. There are a lot of people that do not like public speaking. In fact, in some cases, it's above death as
I've
far
heard
as
that
they
too.
fear.
I know.
And, for somebody to be basically up here making their appeal for why they want to be on a board, and then, by the way, we shoot them down because we pick somebody else, I don't know that that's really beneficial to the candidates. I think that might be a very uncomfortable thing for some people.
I think some candidates.
It's not something that bothers me, obviously, but go ahead.
Yeah, I just think some people wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah.
You may lose some people that way. It's not everybody wants to come up and do a sales pitch into the public on TV from in front of everybody.
And then they get publicly rejected.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, it's not, I know.
Not that we're rejecting them, but when you choose someone
make a
else, you
choice.
are in essence
I know,
rejecting somebody
I
that you
know.
don't pick.
Yeah, I was just thinking of ways to make it a little more real, other than just choosing based on paper. And I get, and I think you mentioned once you called a number of people who applied for some position on a board a few months ago. And that's okay, but I'm telling you, and we had this brief conversation at Sylvia's, you put 40 hours of work in this job, and it's like, I'm not calling.
Nothing you were voting on, Pam.
No,
Pam's
it
like
was
just-
about waffles, but it's like, I'm not calling, 10 different people. I'm thinking, and I know that sounds kind of snippy, but it's like, if you want to reach out and send a personal email and explain something better than the questions in that application, that's bonus points, in my book, as far as taking that initiative. And I know we mentioned that with Mr. Schrader, who did that. But I don't know, it's fine. It's a voluntary board, right? People are doing the best they can. So I hope they feel a sense of energy and engagement as we go forward. But But the other thing I would say is, and I heard the news about Moderna this morning too, that's great, but other things about, vaccines having to have 2 doses and dry ice, and life is not gonna change as far as COVID safety overnight. And so I don't wanna keep making an excuse that, well, we're not gonna meet because of COVID, or we can't do this because of COVID, because we gotta go along and get the work done and engage these people.
Well, I'm not making any excuses. I'm out
I know.
everywhere, so.
I know you are. I know.
But it still is a fact, and we have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Did you have something else to add, or you're done?
No, I'm done.
Okay.
I mean, unless you all are in disagreement with what I outlined, the 2 things that I'm gonna do,
That's good.
I'm done.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I'm good.
From us?
Thank you for listening.
All right, let's take a quick recess for 10 minutes. reconvene the work session. We are on item 12.1. Ms. Hagan.
This is an amendment, I'm asking you to approve an amendment to the subordination agreement entered on September 1st, 2016 among Branch Banking and Trust, BB&T, Clearwater Marine Aquarium, and the City of Clearwater, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Council, we have been requested by the Marine Aquarium to make this amendment to an existing agreement that was entered into in 2016. The existing agreement allows them to obtain a mortgage of up to, I believe it's $25 million. Because of COVID, they need to have the potential need to go beyond that amount, and they are asking us to remove the cap on the mortgage. Now, we will still have a reverter in the event of the property not being used for the stated purpose. However, the mortgage will be superior to our reverter. So in the event of a foreclosure, we would have to pay the mortgage or allow the property to go through a foreclosure. At this point, they're at the max of their authorized amount, and they're asking to lift that.
Any questions?
They will be here Thursday night if you have any questions you would like to ask.
So this says it can be on consent. Is that the case or not?
If you want it on consent, I think they'd be happy not to have to be here. If you would like to put it on consent, they may come anyway in case someone pulls it off consent. They're familiar with
Councilmember Hammond.
I would expect somebody will. But does this does not place, does this raise the cap from 25 to a specific number, or does it just takes the cap off and, you know, whatever the bank will agree to, you're able to get?
That's exactly the description. It takes it off, and they can mortgage as much as the bank would be willing to mortgage.
I mean, I support it,
I support it.
but
I do.
Yeah, I do.
okay, well, we'll put it on consent and if it gets removed, so be it. Item 12.2.
This is the COVID emergency proclamation and resolution.
Any questions for Chief Graham? We'll hear that one on Thursday. Thank you, sir. 12.3.
This is request for authority to settle a case of Clearwater versus the estate of Hotmeyer. And Mr. Fuino is here to discuss that.
Thank you, Ms. Aiken. Good morning again, Mayor, members of council. Michael Foligno, Assistant City Attorney. This agenda item requests authority to settle one of the municipal lien foreclosure cases. The property is under contract, and the offer that's on the table is to settle the case for $25,000, in which case the city would release the lien and dismiss the case, which would allow the transaction to close. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions? No? All right. Thank you, sir. 12.4.
Do we want that on consent?
We're happy to put it on
Yeah, it can.
consent.
Okay. Consent? Okay. 12.4.
Request for authority to settle a case of Clearwater versus H&S Realty and Property, Inc. et al. Mr. Fuino.
Thank you again, Ms. Aiken. This is another settlement offer for a lien foreclosure case. This property has been brought into compliance. The property owner has offered to pay $20,000, in which case the city would accept the money, dismiss the case, and release the lien.
Any questions? Consent?
Yeah.
All right. 12.5.
Confirm the declaration of the state of emergency due to conditions surrounding Tropical Storm Eta and adopt resolution 20-6.
Good morning still. Javon Graham, Division Chief Emergency Management. On top of dealing with COVID, we had to deal with a hurricane out in the Gulf over the last week. A declaration of emergency was issued by the state for the southern part of the state and also this central western portion. Whereas we did not get a direct hit, we did still sustain some damage and effects due to the storm going by. So therefore, a declaration of emergency was issued for the city of Clearwater, which allowed the city manager to enact various mitigation efforts, and this will also allow us, if available or if we can, receive reimbursements from the state and federal level as well. Any questions?
Any questions for Chief Graham? Okay. Any questions on second readings, 12.6 through 12.8? None. City manager verbal reports? Anything, Mr. Horn?
No, Mayor, Council, I have nothing else to add at this time.
Ms. Aiken, anything?
No, sir.
Council discussion item, call-ins after COVID-19. Councilmember Beckman.
Yeah, I had this. So I would like to allow the call-ins. I brought this up before. You know, the CDC is recommending that people not gather for Thanksgiving, not gather with larger groups, enclosed spaces for longer periods of time. We don't know people's home conditions or their personal situation. So I was doing a little research and I thought, well, here was a good compromise. So I'm a big advocate for hearing a person's voice to advocate, and that's or to make their statement, their 3-minute statement. And what if we had people could call and record their 3-minute statement and we could play it here? And so they'd have to record it by a certain amount of time, you know, by, I don't know, 4 o'clock the night before, and somebody could listen and make sure there isn't a bunch of profanity or some big, you know, something like that. But that way we'd push one button and listen to voices. And that way people wouldn't have to drive here. I still think it's a challenge for people to get here at 6 o'clock on a weeknight, on a Thursday, in order to say their piece and participate. I know they can write in, and that's good too. They can email and send an attachment to the agenda, but I think there's power in their voice still. So is that a possibility?
Joelle, Mr. Mayor, what are the technological issues?
Joelle Castelli, Public Communications Director. I think if we tell people a deadline and give them a phone number to call, they can leave a message and we could play that. That's much easier technologically than allowing live during the meeting conversations over the air.
And then you'd be able to clump them, this item number, we're gonna, you'd have to pull them off. Let's say we had 10 people calling in about 6 different items, you'd have to pull and put it in a specific agenda, right?
Well, it would be more rudimentary than that. It would be like us playing it right here on the microphone, picking it up. But it would be, the more calls, the more.
Timestamp, so you could just get, or.
You can
stamp for an
categorize
agenda
it for the
item. Yeah.
for the agenda item, I think is what we're
Okay.
getting at.
But the more calls, the more time intensive that would be for staff.
Okay.
And as was asked or mentioned, are we going to preview the message so that it doesn't have inappropriate language or something of that nature?
You're not going to edit just like you wouldn't edit if they were here. If someone is out of order, you could rule them out of order, but it's not going to be based necessarily on the content of the message. Now, you also have a rule that says 3 minutes, so I assume you're going to cut the tape at 3 minutes.
I would think so.
Yes.
Yeah. But if somebody used profanity, you could just push stop. You're done?
We don't regulate.
No.
Well, don't we tell people to step away if they're.
If somebody gets out of hand completely, then I can call them out of order. But we have had people here before that use distasteful language, tone, and other things, and we sit here and listen to it. And when the 3 minutes is over, they got their spot in the sun, and then we move on. So No, it's gotta be pretty significant. Or they have to run way over the 3 minutes. And just, we haven't really talked about that, and I know some people get upset about the 3 minutes, but it is what we have set as the parameter. And if we let somebody go over the 3 minutes and everybody else abides by the 3 minutes, it is not fair to the people who have abided and gotten their message down to 3 minutes to then let somebody else talk beyond. And that's the main reason. Some people ask me that question out in public. Once I explain to them why, then they tend to understand. But otherwise, there are people that, can't understand why we won't let them go beyond 3 minutes. So what's your pleasure? Do you want to do this until COVID is over? I know you do.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I think you're a great talk show host, so having them come in live was always entertaining for me. But it makes sense to do that, or if, somebody makes a 3-minute YouTube video that they want played. Is that another way to get their comment over? I mean, not just hey, here's a 3-minute music video or something like that, but rather than an audio recording if there's a video recording it. Or am I making it more complicated by suggesting?
No, I don't know. I'm happy to do this for COVID. If we were talking after, I'll tell you I have reservations. I really do. So I'll just preview that right now. Because I still think there's a certain level of responsibility. Because of the pandemic, I can buy into this. But beyond it, then I think, I don't think I'll support it down the road once we have, the pandemic under control and people can come back out.
And that's the clarification I was looking for. Are we talking during COVID or are we talking post-COVID? Because I think post-COVID, it's, just like the same argument we were having or discussion argument during the CRA of, Ms. Flaherty saying, why can't this meeting be in the evening where people work? Well, okay, now we move it to the evening. Now what's the excuse for not being able to be here? Well, it's, so I'm not sure you can have it both ways. I understand, if you have a specific item that you have a passion about and it's on the upcoming agenda, you can make the necessary arrangements, especially for a council meeting in the evening, if you have child issues or whatever, you've got enough time and notice to make the arrangements to be here to have your opportunity to speak. So, that's why I lean at post-COVID into, I think it's live. Everybody will still have the opportunity to send us emails and get their position in front of us before the meeting ever starts.
Well, I think the title on here leads you to believe it's until after COVID. I think we're talking about during COVID. At least that's all I am talking about.
Yeah, during COVID, I'm fine with allowing the call-ins and whatnot, but after COVID, I think it's back to where we were, I think.
Councilmember Beckman?
I'm okay I'll take that for.
Well, do I have consensus from the vice mayor and?
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Councilmember Bunker?
Yep, I'm good.
Well, and I have one more thing, and I don't know if it got inadvertently overlooked and it's certainly not life or death. We can put it on the next work session. But I had made a suggestion about a replacement for the Go Vote banner to have a positive message up there. Do we want to? I thought it was going to be on this agenda, but I sent you all suggestions. Can we comment on that today, or do you want to wait until a next meeting?
Your item, actually, your discussion item is for the next council meeting.
Is it?
The next work session, rather.
Okay, I didn't, sorry, we'll just wait.
Okay. Any new business other than that item? Mr. Mayor?
need to be mindful of the time. We're gonna have to get a digital recorder so we can edit the calls, so they can be put in order of the items. So, well, that's just what it takes. We can do it with a digital recorder. We have to make sure we have that and have it in place, so it won't be ready for the next meeting. My preference, if we could start at the beginning of the year in January and give us a couple of weeks with the holidays.
Digital recorder, what, a couple $100,000? No,
I hope not.
Just trying to
Don't
find a little
start
extra money
rumors,
for you,
please.
Dan, come on.
If it gets that ugly, I'll call you.
Okay,
But it won't. It should be affordable. I just want to set it up. We want to do it right.
okay,
Okay,
very good.
thank you.
Any other comments or issues for future meetings? Okay,
See you Thursday.
then we are adjourned. We'll see everybody on Thursday.